Hey, so quick video before I go to the gym. This is about politicians eating. How much does that actually affect you? When you see your politician eat, what do you think? Does that endear them to you? Does that make them feel like they're one of you? Because it actually works. People have seen this in the polls. This is one of the things I think politicians do that they still do because it still actually works in ways. There's this article with Andrew Yang, Cory Booker, just with his mouth just munching down on something. Pete Buttigieg, I think. Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris just going around right now. They're running up to the whole primary process of the Democratic presidential nomination. They're trying to get the Democratic presidential nomination to run against Donald J. Trump, and then Donald J. Trump himself during his whole campaign run back in 2016, 2015, 2016. All right, so 2016, he was kind of being made fun of eating KFC. And I think I read something about him pointing out that part of the reason he goes to fast food places is because they have a certain standard where you can count on French fries tasting pretty much the same from everywhere. There's might be minor differences. Like I think I remember the chicken nuggets tasting a bit different in Italy than they did in the United States of America, but this was years back, and maybe now in the United States of America, they've upped their chicken nugget game. But something like French fries, like KFC, you come here in Kenya, it's kind of the same as I remember it from being in the United States of America. The chickens might be a little different. Some things might be a little bit different, but you're going to get the same kind of food. You're not going to go to some mom and pop restaurant and have something that they make in some special way that might give you some kind of indigestion, and then you're on the campaign trail. So this that aspect of it, that seems to be a practical thing. But there's this added aspect of the politicians eating to endear themselves to people. And to me, that is kind of worrying that people actually still vote with that as a thing. Oh, I saw this person eating. Now they're more humanized. I'm like, no, this is part of the reason for the whole like universal suffrage. It's not a good idea. Like, why should this matter? And I was just reading iRobot, one of the last stories on iRobot called Evidence. Just to give you a bit of it, it's an Isaac Asimov book. I'm going through the series. If you were thinking, what did people in the past do? Before there was TV, before there was all these things, you didn't really see this much. It wasn't that big of a deal. Like, you're not going to get the coverage of these Iowa state fairs and going to this restaurant, 24/7 news coverage. So you're going to a restaurant and seeing someone eating. You're not going to get an interview with Hillary Clinton talking about, I always carry hot sauce in my, I always carry hot sauce in my bag. Try to reach out to black people and whatnot. Like, get them. What are you doing? Okay, so they have that kind of situation. In this story, there was a politician, somebody who was running, I think, for mayor and something like this, and somebody comes up. This other guy who was going up against him, was saying, "Okay, this person has never been seen. He actually said the person never eats, the person never sleeps, the person never has never been seen drinking," and they were disparaging him, and the guy was bringing up that this person might be a robot. And robot is how they say. Do they say that in Futurama? Robot. What? There's some show where some character says robot. Well, anyway, so they have this kind of situation where this is by Isaac Asimov. I think the book was written sometime in the 50s or something, 1950s, and it was, I think in that book it was around 2000 something, 2020, I think, when this politician was coming up. And at that point in time they still had laws against robots being used on Earth. They could be used in other planets, in space and things like that at that point in time, but weren't allowed to be used on Earth. Definitely weren't allowed to actually be leaders. I mean, they weren't allowed to be in the political process. That would have been horrific. And they were just talking about how they'd never seen him eating. And then one of the people in U.S. Robotics, which is the leading robotics company at that time, came out and said this to this attorney, who was district attorney, who was supposedly a robot. He was sorry, what? He was suspected of being a robot. Words. Come up with the words. He was suspected of being a robot, and then they said all you have to do to prove them wrong is just have one dinner in public and have a few people see you at this public restaurant, and that'll be okay, and that will endear you to people. And then just that whole process where it was kind of showing like that thing was still there, even in a sci-fi book about the future, about this time. They might have gotten some things wrong about how the future would be, but that whole aspect of people still feeling some kind of humanization by seeing somebody else do a very human act, like just a simple eating, that kind of thing, was something that would still appeal. So I thought that was just an interesting crossover between something that was going on in my life and just seeing this. What do you guys think about that? What are some other things that you think humanize politicians to most people that don't necessarily that you think are ridiculous? So you'd rather just focus on the policies. Or are there certain things where you think if they did, rather than these other things, or focus just on policy, they should have this humanization aspect? I'm going to give a quick spoiler. If you want to read the iRobot series and you haven't, I suggest you stop now because I'm going to give a spoiler about that actual story about the character in that thing. It's a great book. So far, I'm really liking the Asimov's stories, and he's the one who invented the whole robot idea. So he had the three laws of robotics are this. The first law is a robot cannot hurt a human or do nothing and let a human get hurt if they could actually stop it. The second law was a robot must follow all directions and orders by humans unless they violate the first law. And then the third one was the robot must protect its own physical well-being at all times unless it violates this second and first laws. So, a quick review about evidence, which is a part of the Isaac Asimov book I, Robot. This one has this character named Quinn who approaches people at US Robotics, which is the biggest robotics company at the time, with the accusation that this district attorney who's going up for mayor named Byerly is a robot by saying he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't drink, never. They're saying he never does these things. And then they go in a back and forth, the people go up, and it's going to be a big scandal because if this comes out that there's actually a robot out there that's that human, and with all the laws and the fears against what robots can do on Earth at that time, it would be a big, horrible thing for US Robotics, a major robotics company in the world at that time. And robots are allowed to work in space, but they're not allowed to be on Earth. And just in general, the head of U.S. Robotics, and I'm forgetting her name, Dr. Susan Collins, if I might be mistaken in that, but I'll just go with Dr. Collins. Okay, on the way to the gym. The name is Susan Calvin, not Collins. I'm going to keep saying Collins. I just finished the last part of the iRobot book, the part called Evitable. Amazing book, but get back to that. There's some really good things in this book on this topic that I've been thinking of a while, how much people are afraid of machines and things like that, yet people don't understand how much technology and machines actually already play a part in our life. So back to the review. She's a robotic psychologist, and she's one of the lead characters in this whole iRobot series so far. I think she's the one being interviewed by somebody. It's the end of her, I think she's in her 80s. It's kind of doing a synopsis on her life and things like that and different things. So she was telling the story, and then they end up going to check because this robot looks very human. Like, oh, if this is human, this is the peak of technology. We want to be able to see this. And a few things that happen with the character of Biley. The first interaction, he goes and he eats an apple at the end of the thing because he's like, I don't eat, I don't sleep. Like, why is this person saying never? Did he say, like, if he actually came out and admitted that he's been spying on me and then he's never seen me do these things? But that I just have my own quirks. I just don't want to do this in public. And he doesn't want to acquiesce to going and just having a simple meal in public to show that. But instead, the robotic psychologist, Dr. Collins, she brings an apple because she could look forward and see this actually happening. He eats the apple, and they say, okay, that's not enough proof. Because if somebody could create somebody as technologically advanced to be that human, they would also be wise enough to know, okay, this might actually come up where he might be forced by a small group of people to eat something in order to show that he's human. So there would have been some kind of small pouch or something that could deal with this kind of contingency. There's a contingency plan for that. So that goes further. That doesn't work. So the guy who wants to get this guy out, Quinn, he ends up sending the authorities to Biley's home. And after this point, they had shown Biley go back to his home, and there was a handicapped person there, an older gentleman, and they don't necessarily say what this person is. They show the interaction between the two. But then he explains what's happening, and it's like, oh, we kind of expected something like this to happen, and then the story continues. Then it goes to the point where authorities are sent to check around the home, to check and make sure and see if there's any kind of signs of robotics and signs of a lab or something to kind of make them think, okay, this guy might be a robot. He might actually be not human. And then they were thinking, okay, so they searching the place, and then they search everything, and then he says, okay, we haven't found anything out of anything suspicious that says like this person's not a human being. And they say, okay, we need to x-ray you physically, x-ray your body and things like that. And then he's like, well, you can't x-ray me, I am a person, like you can't, I have bodily autonomy, so you can't take that away from me. And then the guy was like, okay, no, but we have this warrant that says we have to search everything in the house belonging to Biley. And then he says, that's it exactly right there. You've already accepted me as a human. You've already identified me as a person. Because by saying we have to search everything in the house belonging to Byerly, him, the person who's under suspicion, you're accepting me as a human. Because if I was a robot, as you're saying, I'm suspected to be a robot can't own property. So you wouldn't be able to write, we need to have, if you came back with a warrant saying this person might be a robot, so we have to search him, then that's kind of like a slander situation. Then he can kind of go back at you with that. And they're like, okay, we can't search him. But they tried to x-ray him anyway, and they found out he was wearing some kind of vest to kind of block the x-ray and stuff. So anyway, it gets to the point where he actually ends up going all the way to having a big campaign, because they start doing they start using the media and other sources to kind of put out the suspicions that he might be a robot. And this whole thing comes out. He ends up having this big public rally, and he's talking at the rally, and somebody comes up to him on stage and says, look, I'm actually, he's like, I'm a human. I think you're a robot. I think you're going to actually, I think you're a robot. We can't have you actually run for mayor. We can't allow you to become a politician. You're a horrible person. You're a horrible person. You're a horrible existence. You're some kind of just a horrible thing. We can't do this. The only way you can prove that you're a human is by punching me, because with the first law of robotics, a robot can't hurt a human. But the guy ends up saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And then he says some kind of insult to him. And then Biley ends up punching him. And then it turns out that's enough for the crowd to be like, okay, this guy's not a robot. But that whole situation, then the what's it called, the robotic psychologist is also there, and then she kind of walks away, and then a reporter runs after her, and then he says he's human. She accepts. She says that, and then it's just general public accepts that he's a human, and that was enough to humanize him. That whole him eating in front of the doctors, in front of the experts, wasn't enough. They were kind of worried. I mean, the head guy was like, okay, that's enough. He didn't really care one way or the other. He just didn't want his company to come off like they had created a human robot. The female doctor, she kind of was like, okay, that's enough. She thought past it. But for general public, seeing him have that punch, have that human action, that kind of thing was enough to humanize him. And then he won, and he got into politics, and he went further. And then later on, the doctor is talking to Biley, and turns out Biley is a robot. He's just a very advanced robot. The doctor the older man who was in the house with him, the older crippled man, was actually the guy who he had some awareness of robotics. He had some access to positonic brains. After he got hurt, he created this other Biley robot because he wanted to help the world in different ways. And Biley ended up becoming a district attorney, and there was an earlier point in the book where they were talking about how could a district attorney actually be a robot? Doesn't that violate the first law? Because he's actually going to get into situations where he sentences men, and then the men or sentences humans, and those humans actually get to be in physical harm. Now, of course, you could rationalize ways, and this is what they say. They rationalize that to say that, first of all, he'd admitted that he's never actually sentenced. He's never actually been a prosecutor against an innocent man. So he has the mental capacity, the ability to be able to actually go in and physically actually find out with all the data that's available, this person is, by the letter of the law, guilty. And since he has that rule where he cannot just hurt a human, if he finds one iota of thing that's off to prove that this person actually did it to some kind of point, he would actually not take that case. Or he was a prosecutor, so he would not take that case. When it comes to sentencing, because they're saying, okay, even a robot's not allowed to just capture somebody and then put them in some jail somewhere and then restrict their movement in those kind of ways or demand they pay something. He would rationalize it that all he's doing is showing information to a court, and then the jury, the judges, everything else, they're the ones who actually give the actual, they give the sentence, and then other people come in, the jailers come, and then they're ones who actually put him in jail. If the person ends up being killed with capital punishment, it's the executioner who does that. So the robot himself isn't violating any of the laws in that sense. He's just providing that. And then, of course, he also has the calculation where he's like, look, this person is a murderer. I can take the fact that this person has murdered. I can take the data of why this person murdered. I can take the data of the possibility that this person, with all these other different ideas and things like that, that if this person is out, the chances of him going out and harming more people are like 99%. So at this point, it's actually, by me sitting back and doing nothing would actually violate that first law, because this one person, proving that this one person actually killed these people at this point in time versus letting this one person go around and keep committing crimes would harm all these possible 10 or 20 other people in the future. So it's by the first law he has to do this thing. So with all this kind of stuff, the doctor kind of said, look, I understand you're still doing good things. You're still abiding by the first law of robotics, and you're actually helping. Having you as a mayor is actually more positive for humans, in her estimation, than it would be to have a lesser human. So with me, the reason I'm bringing this up is, first of all, because I think some of our politicians are very robotic. They go through, and they're very like robotic, not even in good robots, they're just crap robots. They just go in and they follow these kind of steps and like, okay, now we do these things and these are the things, we check off these boxes. This is our programming, this is our political programming, we have to follow this way. And we also expect them to behave in a certain way, and they all do the same thing, but just with their small little variations and things like that. Whereas for me, I actually would embrace some kind of system where you actually have robots coming to judgments in some of these things, coming to be like, look, a robot can just have a court case where you have a robot that's advanced enough to put in enough data where you say, look, this person has done this to this person. We've taken an average of, and they already do this, I think, to some extent, how they kind of find some things where if somebody dies, a wrongful death claim, they say, okay, this person was, if this person didn't die, or if this person wasn't hurt by the negligence of this person or business or crime or criminal, then this person might have earned X amount of money over their time, and then now that's actually going to get to a situation where this person is awarded this amount. They do some kind of calculation to do that. So I'm thinking soon there are going to be situations where you can actually have robots or computers or artificial intelligences that are advanced enough to get to the point where you can get the data and be like, okay, how much damage? What is the effect of this? What is the actual numbers of people that are actually affected with these kind of things? And it's going to get to a point where this is already being done. Because think about it. Right now, whether you agree with global warming and things like that or whatnot, or there's already taking in these figures and they're saying this is the damage by humans doing this action. So now we're going to have these carbon taxes to level up this damage being done by these groups, and they're using computer models that are not necessarily that accurate. So this is a thing that's coming. Are you against the switch or the higher involvement of robotics and computers and things like that in politics, in human interactions? Would you be offended or hurt if you would you not accept it if you went to a jail? Would you think it's not fair to go to a place where the robot can technically be more impartial than a human who people say, okay, there's white privilege, or they say this is something that's shown. Men and women committing similar crimes, the women end up having a lot more time. They say there's a big difference between white men and black men. They say this is racist. Oh, a black man commits this crime, a white man does this and gets away from it. That's a sign of racism. But the sentencing gap between men and women is a lot bigger than the sentencing gap between white men and black men. So if there actually is some kind of ism there, is if the sexism there a lot more than the one between the races. But so if you can have a robot that's not male, it's not female, it's not black, it's not white, it just gets the information and says, oh, this person did it wrong, that person gets this many years. Would you prefer that than the system that we have now? So that's it for this video. So that was like a review. I was talking about politicians eating. And this also comes up with the whole like algorithms, the things that are being done with the searching thing. Because we understand these things are already affecting people. These are affecting people in different ways. Political movements have been changed by people tweeting. What's happening in Hong Kong right now with the riots and things like that? The protests is because people were able to get the information. People are able to communicate and arrange and go and be at actual locations and actually plan these things. The way people are fighting back against the authorities or resisting against the authorities is being spread around by getting the information, getting ways of how to do this. Like the what's well, they're trying to use these facial recognition things, and then the protesters are throwing up smoke and lasers to kind of get the cameras away. They're doing this technique of using these cones when the people throw the tear gas canisters. They use the road cones and then they cover it with a road cone. Then they cover the top or they drench it with water. There's of course ways online of hiding your identity. The Arab Spring was the recent big protest movement that went across the Middle East in many Middle Eastern countries. That was involved in a large way from actual what's it called, from tweets and social media and people sharing stories and planning that kind of way. Then, of course, right now we're talking with things like the social media, Google, and the different algorithms that it's doing, how it might be swaying elections to one way or another because of the searches and people putting trust that this is an actual platform that's actually neutral. So if I search something and I get 20 stories on top, those 20 stories are on top because those are what most people are reading. That's what's most true. Whereas if you have a little bias and then it changes the algorithm and then the story is like bumped down to the third page, like they said something like only 10% of people normally go to the third page when they search anything online. So there's all these different kind of things that are being put into consideration that I think we're going to have to deal with very soon. What do you guys think about the use of technology and this kind of things in situations where politics, social issues are being used, and what do you think the human aspect of it is? Do you think this human aspect is very important in it? So that's it. How many people do you think vote for the personality or the politician over the policies that the person is actually voting for? And if it was a situation where you took away all the actual visuals of people and you just had straight policy out, what do you think your voting patterns would change to, or other people's voting patterns would change to? So I've been listening to a lot of sci-fi. I'm moving on to Caves of Steel now, which is now more. It seems to be going to the old detective type of story now based. It's the next book in the series of the iRobot, then followed by Caves of Steel. I'm asking you guys these reviews. I have a few other reviews. I'll put a playlist up of other reviews that I've done. Would you prefer me to stick to straight purely a review of the book if you're interested in this, the book or the movie, or do you not mind this kind of tying it in with other things in life like I did with the politicians? But there's merchandise on the screen. That's one way you can help out this channel, as we're just going out and checking out some merchandise. There was speed drawings going on. I'm going to try to do more of the art with the video, have something to do with it. And in some cases, the art that's being drawn in the video will be available on the merchandise store. These ones are not going to be. Don't really want to support these people. I don't really like the politics of anybody who's drawing there. It was just for the video. So like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below. Goodbye.